Five. And so if you are just tuning in or if you're watching on delay, this is my weekly live chat where I talk about all things Nashville, talk about all things music, just basically answer any questions. And if you follow along, I usually do some live streams during the week, showcasing some gigs. I also try to do like 1 or 2 videos per week, showcasing, get that mic there, showcasing some content, creating some things to let people know, oh, this is what it's like if you live and work in Nashville as a professional musician. And usually the first minute of these live chats is kind of a little bit scary for me or a little bit discouraging because there's no one there. And usually by the end, lots of people show up. But I always think no one's going to show up for this. And what do I do if nobody shows up? Do I just talk to myself for a half hour? But this is also something I'm just kind of committed to doing this year. And it's a little bit scary for me. And I think I'm going to be making a video a little bit later today about, what's this like? The practice of just, doing something regularly, whether there's something exciting and great going on or not. Because I really think that is key and crucial to being a musician, it's not a talent show, it's a marathon. Hey, Joel, thanks for joining. Joel, I got your tip. Thank you so much. I appreciate it greatly. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much. Anything on your mind? Anything you want to chat about? Anything you're curious about? Oh. And, let's just moving some stuff around here. So I think in the coming weeks, the format's going to change a little bit. I'm going to be a little bit more structured with what's going on here. I'm going to maybe promote this in a different way. I'm working on getting a space set up, not only for my videos, but also to conduct some interviews, to also I'm actually going to have some new drummers in town. We're going to have a little bit of a new musician roundtable, and I'm going to answer all their questions. And a lot of this came up last week when I was at a gig, and about like 4 or 5 new drummers in town showed up, and they were all asking me questions. So they were asking me questions, and I wanted to answer them all, but I was like, I'm sure there are many more people out there like you. So we should all sit down, do a little round table, and I can answer these for you, kill a bunch of birds with one stone, but also create something so that when new musicians come to town over the next couple years, I can have this up there for them, and I can say, hey, check this out. This might answer a lot of your questions. So I'm going to do a new musician roundtable, and I'm getting a space set up to do that, where I'm going to have a few cameras set up, I'm going to have a few microphones set up, some lighting. Might need to hire a person or 2, but really what I want to do is sit down with everybody and chat. And that's kind of phase 1. And then phase 2, once I get a little bit more funding or once I find a way to monetize these things, is I really want to create a situation where I can have musicians come into almost like a controlled environment, and see what it's like to play in Nashville. Like literally have a studio set up, a space set up, where I hire the musicians I frequently play with or work with, and we just create a gig essentially. Like, this is what it's like if we're playing a honky-tonk gig. This is what it's like if we're playing just an hour set somewhere. These are some standard songs, and just really play. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have different musicians just come and sit in, not tell them what to expect, not tell them what's going on, just be like, here, this is happening. Can you do it, yes or no? And have that happen in a controlled environment where it's not going to be like we're on a stage and this counts for everything, but really set this up as an intentional learning experience where we might throw some curveballs at some people, but really to give them a safe space to try this stuff out and figure out like what they need to know, because there's so much things you can't figure out unless you like go right to the fire. But then if you like hop on a gig sometimes and you totally embarrass yourself, you're afraid people may not call you again, and some people may not. So what I really like to do is, my phase 2 is create an environment where I have a studio, have musicians there set up and playing, ready to play with musicians that come in, and then just have people come in and say, all right, we're gonna sit down, play this tune. You don't know it? Oh, well, here we go. 3, 2, 1. And that's not to be a hard ass, that's really just what it's like playing music in town. So for example, yesterday I was playing a gig, and I was, a friend of mine, Sean, he's new to town, he's been to town for about 2 weeks, and I actually met him he was one of the people I met last week, or we've talked before. He found me on YouTube. I had him sit in and play a tune, play 2 tunes, and one of the tunes he's never heard before. And he did fine. You know, there were some things like he may have missed a stop, or he may have been playing a snare instead of a side stick, but really those things don't matter to 90% of the audience, 90% of the musicians. But I had him come and sit in and play, and I thought that was like, I made sure like, okay, here's a song you don't know. And he didn't know, and he did fine. So that's what's going to be coming in the future. But I really, so who else do we have here? I'm curious if we have any questions, if we have any thoughts. Tell me about your week, what's going on, because this is really just me hanging out with friends right now. And let me check the chat stream. Okay, so we got, looks like we got a quiet little group here today. But I'm sure when we get towards the end, that's when everybody starts coming in with the questions. So really, this isn't about me just talking, because I come to these, I have very little things prepared. You know, I talked about maybe social media and about shadow banning, because that came up with a lot of people, and social media strategy came up this week with several musicians and non-musicians. And, you know, I could talk about that, or I could just, you know, answer the questions you have. Joel says, I saw an original country artist at the Maverick here in Tucson Thursday night. Her name is Bree Baglow out of Texas. Talked to her bassist. He said he prefers playing with an original artist instead of pop covers. Yeah, I would, yeah, that's a good topic. You know, original versus covers, and what do you do? And we can approach this in a couple different ways. Are you approaching this as a side musician, as a supporting musician, or are you approaching this as an artist? And I think both have their merits. So we think about these things that they need to exist you need to be all in one camp, all in the other. Man, like last week, I went and saw some guys in a band. So if you've heard of Rascal Flatts, said drummer Jim Riley, he was playing a gig, and he was actually, Jim Riley was like the musical director of Rascal Flatts for a while. I don't know if they're touring right now or not, but he was, you know, playing with a highly successful original band, but he was out doing a honky-tonk set, just playing basically covers. And one or the other isn't bad or good, doesn't make you more or less valid. You know, and if I'm playing with an original artist, what am I doing? Am I covering somebody else's parts that somebody else recorded and I need to kind of keep to the original? Am I making my own part? Also, if I'm playing a cover gig, are we trying to keep it close to the original version, or are we going to take some liberties with it and kind of stretch out in the tunes? And that's just a stylistic. You know, we can also talk about, just all the logistics behind it, with money, with the expectations of the gig, with how you comport yourself on the gig. Hey, Anthony, how's it going? I also got a chance to talk with Anthony last Sunday night? And Anthony, I was just talking about how I'm going to get a little new musicians roundtable set up here in about a week or two. Working on renting out some space, working on getting some new cameras, some additional lighting. And, you know, all these things, they're really important. And I feel that a lot of musicians don't have these tools when they come new to town, or there just aren't these tools out there for musicians in general. You see all these people, Joel, to talk about, social media, how you enjoyed that. One of the things that I think can be dangerous about social media is we feel the need to create this illusion, the old smoke and mirrors, like I call it, where you feel that you need to look like you are so built up, so important, doing like everything great. It's just like when you talk to other musicians. How's it going, man? Oh, it's great. I got this and this and this going on. And everyone wants to look so busy and so important. And sometimes we are so successful in doing that we make it seem unobtainable to everyone else. Or we feel that we have this pressure that we can't put something out unless it is top notch, right? Like everything needs to be perfect. And one thing I'm trying to really do with my social media is saying, yeah, I have goals to get up to that level. And I will get there, and I want to highlight the journey. And this isn't so much an ego trip for me, but this is really, when I was coming up, and I still am coming up, I think I will be for the rest of my life, I would read Modern Drummer. I would see all these other music magazines. I would see on social media, and I would see these musicians, and I'm like, wow, their life is so easy, it's so great. If I could just get there one day, and thinking it would just be like one step and then boom, I'd be there. Really, it's a constant grind. And social media can sometimes take away from that, or make you think that, oh, I should just instantly be here. And then when you're not there, you feel that anxiety. And what do we do to pacify our anxiety? We distract ourselves, social media, the cycle goes on. So what I'm really trying to do is showcase all the steps along the way and say that there's not one easy way, there's not one way to do it. A lot of it is tough. And sometimes we want to feign like it is not tough. We want to act like everything is smooth sailing, that we don't have anxiety, that we don't have self-doubts. And I want to normalize that. Again, not so much for my ego, but I think if I would have understood this at a younger age, I could have made some better, more healthier decisions, both for my personal life and my professional life. And I really want to kind of break all that down, break all that, like, okay, this stuff, you can do it. It's not as glamorous as it seems, but if you love it, that doesn't matter. And the real value is in the day-to-day grinds. I'm going to post a video, I think, today. So last week, I posted a video about social media and about kind of the how it can be really damaging and toxic. And I know a lot of people have a take on this, but I really would encourage everyone to watch that, because I spent probably about like good 2 months, literally 2 months thinking about that. And I knew that it wasn't going to get a lot of traction on social media, and I wanted to say it anyways because I think it's really potent and powerful. I want to encourage everyone to read this book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. Yeah, it's an amazing, it was written in 1985. And a lot of us think that sounds really uninteresting, but the thing about that, it predicted everything with social media. Yeah, so I could go on and on about that. Anthony on drums. Anthony, he also, I think I got some video of you, Anthony. I might want to share that. But yeah, Anthony, we just need to find a space. I'm working on getting a space, but I'll get to that in a second. Joel said, I want to answer a couple questions. So we have Annalisa with a question. Joel said, I learned that to get a bar gig, the owners want guaranteed following that will come, drink and eat and make them money. That's a good angle, or that's one way to approach it. And I think every scene is a little bit different. There's a bunch of different trains of thought with that. Now, Joel, some people say, yeah, I agree totally. And some people say, no, that's bullshit. And I'm like, I have no idea. So here in Nashville's a little bit of a different scene, right? But when you come to Nashville and you're going out to honky tonks on bars on Broadway, you're not going out to see a specific musician necessarily. Maybe if you're going to a show at the Ryman, but if you're going to the honky tonks, you're going out to see, Nashville musicians. It's like kind of like going on a safari. Literally, you're going to see the attraction. You're not going to see like a specific person or anything like that, or a specific line. You just want to see a line out in the wild, just like most people want to see a Nashville musician. So in Nashville, when you're playing a honky-tonk set, it's not necessarily the musician's job to bring in the following, per se. I think a lot of musicians think that way. A lot of musicians think they should show up, and we are like a jukebox to the audience. And if you are an establishment, you should have a good establishment, you should have good food or good drink, or be known for selecting good quality artists and have a built-in crowd. And there are honky-tonks here in town that do that, and they will fire you if you don't play well or don't play what the audience wants to hear. Now, there are other venues, both in Nashville and outside of Nashville, that if you are playing a set, they want you to not only be a good musician, but they want you to be a good marketer, a good promoter. They're basically passing the entire buck off onto the musician. They're just the venue, and I think that can be problematic. And I'm not saying necessarily offering a solution about that, because there's so many things about the music industry that are problematic. But sometimes you have to do all the marketing, do all the promotion, do all the production even yourself when you're on a gig, which it shouldn't be. But when you're at certain levels, sometimes you have to do more than is fair. Because again, music is just like the rest of life. It is not a meritocracy. It is, who do you know? How can you network? Do people like you? Can you bring people in? Can you make money? Even as a musician, 95% of being a musician, especially being on tour, has nothing to do with music. It's, are you agreeable? Can you work with a bunch of different peoples? Can you adapt to a bunch of different situations? Make everyone comfortable. And I would talk more about that at all. But Annalisa, how do you get gigs? So Annalisa, are you asking me how I get gigs? Or are you asking how you, or just somebody in general, would go about getting gigs? Tell me more about that. And, of course, we are on a tape delay, so sometimes when I say tell me more, I might have to wait a little bit longer. I might have to ramble on. But if I'm talking, please enter in some questions, enter in some texts. And I might not get to it right away, but eventually I will get to it. And so Anthony, by the way, Anthony, jeez. This is a good point I want to share with everybody. I think I know Anthony's last name, but it doesn't come to my mind right now. I know it's somewhere up in there. But Anthony on drums, he also, when he texts me his number or messages me on Instagram, he always signs off Anthony on drums. And I think that's really great. That's ingenious. It's like you have a brand. And people remember that. I sometimes am afraid of doing those things because I'm really self-conscious and feel like it just makes me uncomfortable. I thought it was Santiago, but I was just like, seriously, I love the Anthony on drums. For those of you out there, start thinking of a brand for yourself. And if someone wants to laugh at you or mock at you, cool. At least they remember you. I don't think anything negatively about Anthony for saying Anthony on drums, but I definitely remember him. And even if I did want to mock him about that, I still would know it's Anthony on drums. And I think that's a really good idea. Seriously, lean into that, man. It's something so easy to remember. So to answer Annalisa Gentile's question, how do I get my gigs? It's a great question. I would say, let's think about gigs as kind of like food, right? There's a lot of different ways you can get food. You can be a hunter-gatherer, just kind of pick stuff up. You can be a farmer, and plant your seeds and tend to your crops. You can know other people who produce food, and you give them things in exchange for that. So let's think about gigs in that same way. And for me, when I first got to town, I wasn't even planning on playing music. And I literally started from scratch. I had no social media for my musical stuff. I really had no current demos or examples of my playing. And so how I got gigs, I knew some people. I went out and talked to some people. But then like I spent a lot of time I was looking for anything and I was hungry for anything. So I would keep my eel peeled to the ground. I ended up, so I did a few gigs when I first got to town, and boy, they did not go well because I did not know what the hell I was doing, especially with the way things go in Nashville. And I spent some time licking my wounds and thinking maybe I shouldn't play music. So one thing, but I was always looking for gigs, and there's a Facebook group here in Nashville. So here in Nashville, like since there's so many gigs coming and going, right? Sometimes people just like, I need somebody for this gig. And I talked to this one guy. He was newer to town. He was actually like living in Knoxville at the time. I think he still kind of lives in between Knoxville and Nashville. And he was like, I just need someone for my regular Monday gigs. It's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Monday. So it's like there wasn't a lot of people wanting to do it. And I chatted with him for a little while on Facebook. And I said, send me your song list. I said, cool. I will know all of this. He sent me about 4 hours of songs. I said, I will know all of this, in a couple days. And I think he called me for his first gig about like a week later. And it was for a sub because nobody else, it was a snow day and there was not a lot of other people there to play. So I just hopped in on that gig and I did okay. And sometimes they just want a body. And that was really, I started doing that regular Monday gig because nobody wants to play that shift because you barely make any money, and I was making barely any money. But that was like college for me, in a sense, for like Nashville. I was learning a lot of country tunes, getting my feet wet, getting a feel for how things are done, all the while learning. So then kind of word of mouth starts spreading, or like I started taking videos of myself, and I would look on message boards looking for people who wanted a musician for a shift on Broadway. Doing things like that. And that like started slowly building up my social media. And I'm still working on that, and it's still very much a part of the job. And a lot of people are starting to know me now through social media, but they also know me from playing gigs. And I'm always like, I always want to film on a gig. If I get a gig, I always want to get everyone's number if I don't have their number. Like, do that. Get everyone's number, give everyone your number. Even if you don't want to play with them again, even if you think they don't want to call you, what's the worst they can do? Not call you? Cool. But at least they have your number. So doing things like that, but then also just going out, seeing people, being active on the scene. If you're out of sight, you're out of mind. One of the best tips I have about Nashville is never let them forget your name, never let them forget your face. That's, again, bringing it back to Anthony on drums. I'm going to remember that now. And because I'm talking about that, most of you are probably going to remember that name brand. But really, there's no one way to go about getting gigs. There's like, I'm saying how I went about getting my gigs, but it's also like, go out and know people. Like, people are your best resource, especially in Nashville. Even if they aren't the best musicians, even if they aren't the most well-connected. Another story I had is that, like, I got a couple stories about like these not very exciting gigs. There was another time I was going to fill in on a gig because it was one of the coldest days of the year here in Nashville. It was below zero. Every place was shutting down. Everyone was calling off, and the pickings were slim for like, everyone was looking for somebody to sub for a gig. So I went and subbed on a gig, and the expectations were really low because I'm like, hey, I'm new to town, I'm new to this, but like I can come and do this if you want me to, just letting you know. And they said, sure. So I went and played that gig, and that gig went fine enough. And then from that gig, the next person who was playing the gig after me, they're like, we don't have a drummer, can somebody please help us? And so I sat in and played that gig. And I didn't know all the songs, but they knew that. They're like, oh, the expectations are low. After that gig, I got everyone's number, and I stayed in touch with those people. I literally, like, immediately after a gig, I messaged everybody, followed everybody on Instagram that I met that day. I said, thank you so much for having me play with you. I really enjoyed it. I posted videos, tagged everybody that was in those that I played with. so that they would know me. And so maybe they would post that on their social media, right? And then things just start spreading. And it doesn't happen like that, but people see your name, they see your face. And maybe they won't add you as a friend right away, like when they see you on someone else's page. But if they see your name enough in certain circles, they're like, oh, this person is legit. Cool. Let's, maybe give this person a try. That's one way I did it. Another way was like I was taking a gig with somebody that I think it paid like $60. Not worth my time. I think I barely made any tips. And it was exhausting. Nice enough guy. And it was just exhausting because it was like one of the hottest days of the year. And, it was a good gig, but it was just, man, I had to I was by a sunny window the entire time. It was over 100 degrees. But from there, the bassist on that gig recommended me for another gig at the same venue, which I really don't like playing because I never make money there. But I said, I'm not doing anything there. So cool. I got another gig at that venue with another artist. And then that artist ended up calling me for a bunch of road work. And this artist was just doing this gig as kind of like a tune-up session. And this artist just happened to like me and thought I was cool. And they were doing a lot of other work, and that led me to a lot of other roads. So it's really just you have to pull at a bunch of threads if you're trying to get gigs in town. And realize that some of these threads aren't going to really produce anything, but you have to keep pulling, keep putting yourself out there. It takes a long, long time. Want to answer, let's see, got some questions. So Paul says, your fellow musicians, what do they use hooked up to their mic stands? Like what app do they use, I guess, for the chords and words? So everyone uses different things for lyrics. So everyone uses different apps. Some people use like a guitar chord app. Some people, they have a Dropbox folder. So I used to really rely on Fourscore, and I still do. I keep about like 5,000 charts on there. And that has both chords and drum, information. So if I'm on a gig and someone plays a song I don't know, I can call that up. I used to have to really rely on that as a crutch. I no longer do that because just after playing so many songs for so long, it gets ingrained in you. So if you're playing, and again, every gig's going to be a little bit different. If you're playing a gig where someone requests a song that you've never heard of, or the front person's ever heard of, they're going to I have no idea what that song is. Let me pull up the charts. Let me pull up the chords. And everyone has a little bit of a different system. Some people are really good at it. Some people are still developing at it. So I don't know what apps everyone else uses. Some people use, there's Fourscore, there's One Charts. Some people use Ultimate Guitar. I would suggest learning the Nashville number system. So one thing I have that I'm working on developing or coming out with is a little package. I'm thinking about making it $5, $10, where I have, here's a master list of songs, here's a master list of charts, and this isn't by any means, this isn't the end-all be-all, but this is a good starting point. And I have about 5,000 of those charts and maybe about 10,000 tunes on Spotify. And by no means do I know all of them, but it's a good jumping off point, and kind of, if you're on a gig, everyone has different levels of comfort regardless of what instrument you're playing. Some people are like, all right, it's just it's a 41-45, which means 4-bar phrase, a bar of the 4 chord, bar of the 1 chord, bar of the 4 chord, bar of the 5 chord. Things like that. And I could really go on and on about that. So Jeremy, will you make sure to make sure it's fully open so when the sticky... Okay, cool. That's lovely, Jeremy. So Annalise, so with the charts, charts kind of like a roadmap, right? Everyone has different charts. Charts meaning musical notation. And everyone has a different way of reading that, learning that. There's a Nashville number system, which I suggest everybody kind of be familiar with. It's just basically you're just basically using numbers. So, common chord progression is a 1, 4, 5. The first degree of a scale, fourth, fifth. So like, let's say you're playing C. That's just basically like, C, F, G. Very common. And we have different ways of notating that, and it's just very shorthand, and it's easy, accurate, easy to flow with. So I'm gonna start, I'm gonna maybe make a video about that. There are lots of videos about that, but really the best way to get this information is to like just throw yourself into the fire. And Joel, what you're saying, slow incremental growth seems to be the name of the game. Absolutely. Not just for music, not just for marketing, networking, but just for everything, right? We're in this culture where people want things immediately. You want that instant gratification. What's the best way to get a gig? What's the best way? What's the songs I need to learn? What do I need to, what's the one thing I need to do to grow my social media following? The best advice I have for anything is that the shortest path is taking the long road. I will eventually release a big folder of charts, and that by no means gets you there at all. And a lot of those charts, maybe some of the stuff is kind of wrong on them. Seriously, they might be missing a measure or two, and it's just kind of oh well. And it's not because I'm being a hard ass or a stickler, but it's you just have to know this stuff. I used to have a teacher that told me, get my head out of the charts, get my ears and my eyes going forward. And that's really the best advice I could give you. Oh man, dude, Joel, thank you, Iron Man. Thank you so much for you're always tuning in. And Joel, that's freaking awesome, man. So last year he played 7 gigs, and this year he's at 3 already, and have 3 more lined up for March, man. So you're on pace to now what you do a lot more gigs. And that's something I'm gonna eventually be talking about coming up, is how do you define success? Do you define success through the number of gigs you play, which is great? Do you define success by the amount of money you make, by the amount of followers? And one thing I've been turning down some gigs because I only have so much time and energy, and I really have to be intentional about where I'm spending that. And I don't want to spend too much time on content, but I also don't want to spend too much time grinding out 4-hour gigs. I did 2 of them back to back yesterday, and it was a long day, but I was fine. But there's people out there doing regularly 2 and 3 gigs a day, and 4-hour gigs on Broadway. And I say, is that success? Because there are musicians that are much higher up the chain that are doing 1 or 2 gigs a week. Doesn't make you any better or worse. It's just more stuff to think about. Iron Man says, what's the minimum base pay for playing bars? What's the minimum wage there in Nashville? So that's a good question. And that all really varies depending on, the base pay varies depending on how many people are in the band, what honky tonk you're playing. I would say, so base pay is usually, I would say, anywhere from $75 to $150. $150 is good, 75, yeah. So right now, I'm really kind of defining my boundaries, but I tell people my expectations. And I'm not saying people should or shouldn't do this, but I'm saying this is where I'm at right now. And I let people know my expectations financially and in terms of time, in terms of the way things go. Because I've worked enough where I've built a network and I know what works for me and what doesn't work for me. For example, I turned down a gig the other day because it was $300, but it was that night, it was 2 hours away or 3 hours away. And then it was a turn and burn, and I would get back at 7 in the morning. No, I just didn't want to do that. I don't do that anymore. Or I don't play gigs where the base pay is $60 per person. I think minimum wage in Tennessee is $7.25, $7.50, which is ludicrous. It's outrageous. And one mistake I made when I was younger was, a mistake for me, out of principle, I would not do certain things. I would not, 15 years ago, I would not play a gig for $50. No, there's way more time and money involved in that, and my skills are worth something. And was I right in theory? Yeah, but did that do me any favors? Not necessarily. So one really great piece of advice I got when I first moved to town was a trusted friend of mine said, say yes to everything. Some people disagree with that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. But since I was new in town, I realized my first year or two was going to be like, I was going to have to say yes. I was going to have to pay a lot of dues. So I had to realize that the money, the music, the people, most of them weren't going to be good on 80% of the gigs, and most of them would lead to nothing. But I would have to kind of wade through things to get there. So that was me like a year or two ago. Now I'm kind of a little bit more selective. And everyone has different wants and needs. And if your definition of success as a musician is financial, yeah, you can make decisions based on that. Do you just want to play? Cool. Are you trying to build a network, trying to build a career? But the whole point was, when I was younger, a big thing, I was really focused on what was fair and what was right versus what I needed to do to advance my career. And you know what? Music, this economy, the way our systems, it's not right. It takes advantage of a lot of people. You are the deck can be stacked against you, and very much is sometimes. And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, but like, can you change it in that moment, or can you what can I leverage from this situation? That's what I always ask people to think about. Yeah, and so 3 shifts for 12 hours a day, yeah, does make for a long day. And think about that. If you're doing, I know people do like 15 shifts a week. So that's 60 hours behind a drum kit. That's not including the time it takes to and from getting to the gig. And so when you're doing that, you have to ask yourself, I might be making some good money, but at what cost? What cost to my physical, to my mental health? Am I out there networking with the people I want to network with? Am I improving on my instrument, or am I getting more fatigued physically and mentally? And I'm not saying one is good or bad, but it's like, these are the decisions you have to make. Yeah, so Co says, drummers and all musicians have been undervalued since COVID. Should be $200 per gig for each musician. Just my opinion. Yeah, and I would say even more. If you work 40 hours a week, really, I think in this, you should be able to afford to live. And living in Nashville right now can be expensive. All the gear you acquire can be really expensive. And keep in mind how much of a skill it is to be a musician. Like, a lot of people undervalue that. But if you go see a doctor, right? And a doctor is incredibly valuable. I spent a lot of time working in medical myself, and I did that in between my stints as a musician. But a doctor doesn't start learning about being a doctor till they're 18. And they would go through like 8 years of school maybe, which is very intense, right? But if you're a musician, by the time you go to college, you essentially have to be at a professional level and then continue developing your skills. Now, I'm not saying that musician is more or less valuable than a doctor, just putting that in perspective. Musicians, yes, we are not valued. And I could sit and boo-hoo about this and say and tell people, you need to pay me, but are they going to pay me? Probably not. So I start thinking about, how can I leverage myself? What can I do to climb up the ranks to make myself more valuable? Can I start building relationships, building networks? Can I start building my own future where I can make money? And the thing about the music industry is that there's always money to be made. It is just in all these different parts now, and it's always going to different parts. And one thing I really want everyone to think about is, think about the music economy. Like, if we're really thinking about this in terms of money, this is an incredible time to be a musician. We could look at yes, musicians are undervalued, but there's so much opportunity out there. And here's what I mean. So let's think about the way we've started developing entertainment, or consuming entertainment and content. So before the 20th century, Like, we had to go see it in person. You could not own a recording. You could not own a movie, right? You would have to go see a play. You would have to go hear, you would have to hear a concert and then enjoy that moment, then it'd be done. But now we can own a piece of that. And that whole structure of physical media, like both the technology and the delivery systems, were built up over about 100 years in the 20th century. You know, from recording facilities to, you know, musical delivery mediums, from vinyl to tape to CD to digital. All these things, and like the distribution, like with record labels, movies, TV, all this stuff was like kind of built over 100 years. Now let's think about the internet, right? The internet blows that whole model up in about a span of 10 to 15 years maybe, right? Something we spent like a lifetime developing. So now we have this kingdom, and then it blows up, and all these pieces are all scattered all over the place. And so those pieces are out there for you to gather up, all right? Everything's been broken up into pieces so you can build your own kingdom, right? But here's the rub, is that you actually have to build that kingdom, okay? You can't just walk into somebody else's castle like getting a record contract back in the day. And back in the day, that record contract, you would have to pay for the record, you would have to pay for the distribution, pay for the marketing, but that recording contract, they just kind of front-ended, they gave you all the money, kind of a loan, but you would have to pay that money back over your contract. Now, you don't have to do shit. You don't have to pay anybody anything. You just have to do all the work yourself. So if we think, all right, all these pieces are scattered, I can gather them up, I can buy the equipment to record my own music, I can record my own music, I can mix it, I can distribute it, I can put it out there. You know, now monetizing it is something different. And, you know, people really aren't selling physical media anymore. They aren't selling music. They aren't selling CDs or albums, really. So how do you make that money? Well, you can make it through licensing. You can make it through sync. You could start, you know, a pay site where people are like paying to see your information. The content creator economy. So it's very different. But all these, we've had this kind of this whole system built up over generations, then it gets blown up. So now is the time to take advantage of it. You just have to go to where it's at. Yeah, it's a pretty big diatribe. So let me scroll over a bunch of these questions here. So Iron Man's asked me how hard it was to convert to country music for the most part. That's another good question. So I never listened to country music, period. Not until 2022. I grew up playing jazz, rock, pop, hip hop. Went to school for jazz, also studied classical as well. Country music has never been my thing. I like to joke with people, and I've never driven a tractor, I've never hunted, never fished, never done anything with mud tires, any of that stuff. So country music, it was both like a stylistic and a big cultural shift for me. And I'm always going to be more of a city person. I'm always going to be some of the messages behind modern country music are just kind of lost on me because I haven't lived that experience. So, but for me to learn country music, it took some time, and it's still something I'm like taking time to listen to and understand. Whereas people who grew up listening to country music, they don't need to study it because you don't need to study the music of your youth. You automatically understand it. It's kind of like, think about the music that really connected with you when you were younger, right? That you loved. Like, that stuff is just ingrained in you. You understand the music. You understand, like, just the feel for it. You never studied it. It's like a language. If you grew up speaking English, of course you can go to school and study it and study the finer points of it, and study ways to communicate, you know, in English through writing, but you really understand language. And music is very much the same way. And it's not just like listening to the music, but it's being in the era at the time. Like, music is a representation of your culture. So I did not grow up in a country culture. I did not grow up listening to it. So it's all foreign to me. So I really was far behind. So one thing I did was I watched Ken Burns' entire country music documentary series, which is like 8 parts in like 10, 12 hours. And I really just put on a shuffle list in my ears nonstop, like, and just really became a student of the music. And because I've learned to play so many different styles, it was a little bit easier for me to learn. And I'm still learning it and still learning the nuances. But it's really, for me, it's like, it was just like a repertoire game. How many songs can I learn? Like, learn all these things, just absorb it, absorb it, absorb it. And then you'll start seeing some patterns emerge, some typical song forms. So I would tell people, if you are new to country music, like, think about studying Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings. Like, think about guys who are like, Johnny Cash, people who have like wrote a ton of songs, Willie Nelson, of course. Think about like really studying those people, and a lot of music just flows from there, and you'll start like deciphering the code of all those things. And again, like, country is not my bag. I'm by no means a historian on it, but I play with a lot of like legit players, and I've kind of like picked up what they do, and I've been very upfront. I said, listen, I'm new to the style. Like, tell me what you want to tell me. What are the tips you can tell me? Be humble. Like, don't go in there like, I don't know what I'm doing. But say, hey, I'm new to town. I'm new to country music. Just letting you know, I'm eager to play this gig with you. If there's something you want to see here, let me know. Be open to that. And some country musicians or some older jaded musicians will be like, whatever, figure it out. And then some people will be like, oh, okay, I was there before, I got you. Yeah, again, no one way to tell you how to do it. So Anthony says, do you write your own charts when learning it? That's a good question, Anthony. It all depends. What am I learning? Am I learning so if I'm learning an original artist song, oh yeah, absolutely. So when I'm doing original artist material, I really pay attention and take a little bit more like specific notes and write out my own charts. If I have somebody else's charts and I'm trying to learn songs, I'll like look at their charts and read it while I'm learning the songs, make some notes on it myself. But invariably, you are going to be on a gig and there's going to be a song called that you don't know, and you have to learn it right away, right on the fly. And I've got a couple instances of that, of learning songs on the fly, and I'll put that in the chat. But there are so many songs that you need to learn when you're playing in Nashville, hands down. You can't make out charts for all of them, right? But you can't expect to have charts for all of them. So there's going to be some kind of balance between, what do you learn, what do you write out, and what do you like, I don't have time to write this out. So with songs, like, I always just kind of like make a mental note, like, what's the form? Are we having verse, chorus, bridge, chorus out? Like, start learning the big parts, start learning, okay, are these like 4-bar phrases? Is there any weird like 9, 10-bar phrases? Are there any curveballs on this song? Things like you just need to like learn on the fly. Yeah, I think I can maybe like, I think I have a few examples of songs where, or instances where I don't know, what song the band was playing. I'm gonna put that here in the chat if I can just find. I have probably about like 5 examples of that. So I'll put a couple examples in the chat. But yeah, and we have maybe time for about 1 or 2 more. So if you guys want to ask, while I put those things in the chat, please let me know. Yeah, any more questions? Anything people want to share before? Yeah, I have to end this chat, and I'm trying to multitask here and put this into the chat channel. Okay, here we go. So Anthony, I'm gonna put this. Here's one example of me not knowing a song or someone like calling. I have a couple different examples, and I should make a playlist about this. So here's a good example video. So there's that. So what was this? Yeah, and this was, so I was actually, so this video is actually that I'm posting in the chat. I never heard the song before, and I was looking at somebody else's chart. I didn't make this chart at all. And I never heard the song before. Most people have heard the song. I have not. And so Anthony, like, check out that video. And like, I put a chart in there, and with a big folder of charts as well that you can check out. And there's some good content in there. But also, but then there's times when, and I want to put, this is a little bit of a more recent video, and this is really, I kind of showcase the mental process of when they play a song. I don't have a chart for it. I've never heard it before, but oh, we need to make this thing happen. So check out this one as well. So Annalisa, do I post my schedule when I play? Sometimes. It just happens on the fly. I mean, so many things in Nashville are just like bing, bang, boom. I can tell you right now, I'm going to be trying to live stream my gigs with Aaron Nichols. They're going to be the next 2 Fridays. So I'm playing Friday the 8th from 2 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then Friday the 15th from 2 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. I'm also, she's working on a new album right now, but we're going to take a little bit of break and do some shows here. I think I'm going to be doing a show with Cara Granger. I have some videos with her on my channel. I think that's going to be on the 16th at Acme. That's, I believe, it's Saturday. That's going to be 5:30 to 7:30 Central Standard Time. And I'm just going off the top of my head. And also just working on a few other things. Again, I'm trying to be a little bit more selective with my gigs and a little bit more. There's only so much time I have. And I have to think about, what do I want to be? Do I want to be just a drummer? You know, or do I, like, if I want to be just a drummer, like, where do I want to be playing? Do I want to be just a content creator? Should I be spending more time creating content? Do I want to be a producer? Like, thinking about what my goals are. And I encourage everyone, what's your definition of success? What would make you happy? What would make you fulfilled? And I encourage everyone to follow that thread and work from there. Like, think about, what is your dream scenario? Not, oh, I just want to go to Nashville and play. What do you want to play? Who do you want to play with? How much money do you want to make? Work backwards from there. Like, be specific about your goals. And that's what I'm really trying to, like, lean in on. So I'm about to wrap this up. These always go longer than I anticipate. I really, couple things though, I really want to thank everyone for tuning in. So coming up, like, I have a lot of things that I feel I need to share. Not that I want to share, but I need to share. Things like getting a space, a permanent space set up with lighting, with a studio where I can do both musical instructional things with a band and show other musicians how it's done in Nashville, but also do more interviews with people. Because I have a lot of people I want to interview coming up, and I think there's a need for this. And really what I'm trying to do is a couple things. Trying to get to 1,000 viewers so I can further monetize this channel. So if you share this with somebody, that would help out tremendously. If you engage, like, comments, all those things, engagement really helps grow this channel. It costs you nothing. So last week, you know, I had a few tips. I think so Joel was one of them. He tipped last week. That was, like, really great. And if you could make a small investment in this channel, you don't have to. There's a PayPal tip on my profile. There's also Venmo.com, Aaron Apter. All those things really help. Like, I put all that into this channel, into the infrastructure. Also looking to, like, build out either a space or rent out a space where I can permanently make content for people, and do this, like, really on a permanent basis. So Nick, you'll be up here in November. Cool. Oh man, Nick, thank you so much for following and commenting. And Nick, when you do get into town, let me know. You know, like, come out to a gig, come chat with me. I think I met Anthony at a drummer's lunch, but he's come out to a few gigs. I've met a lot of people who follow me on YouTube. They will come out to a gig. And if they come out to a gig, I'll be like, hey, nice to meet you. Like, how can I help? And really my whole goal with this channel, again, it's not about self-promotion. It's about how can I help other musicians. And really what I want to do is, again, show people the ropes, the things that, like, there's this big gap between, okay, I need to move to this industry town. What do I do when I move there? There's no, it's kind of like, okay, you're on your own. It's like we see all these people working, but we have no idea. And so really what I want to do is break down some of this information for everybody and present it in a way which is really accessible and make it seem less overwhelming for people and give people more tools. So again, that's why I'm going to be like, I'm upgrading, buying a few more cameras, buying a few more mics, a few more lighting, also like hard drive space. It's all adding up, and I really love this. And again, if you could share this, follow, comment, have other followers, that will really help monetize this. If you want to support this channel through a tip, I would be forever appreciative. Or if you want to commission a video, feel free to commission a video. Yeah, so if you have any questions at all, shoot me a message here. Like my email is on the top of this page or top of my YouTube page. I'm also at instagram.com/AaronAfterMusic if you want to follow. I also post some stories there and post some more of my day-to-day stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Be kind to one another, listen to one another, really. And if I help you, I expect nothing in return. I just want you to pay it forward. Please, because great thing about Nashville is, you know, we're all here helping each other. You know, one drummer was asking me, "You've helped me so much, I'm going to pay it back to you one day." And I say, "You don't pay it back to me. Next year, you're going to be doing this for somebody else." So I really encourage all of you to think about somebody who helped you along the way and try to emulate them. It's like, music is not a solo act. Music is, it's a conversation with the community. Either conversation with the community on stage, or even if you're a solo musician, you're having a conversation with the people out there. And so we're all doing this together. No one does it alone. So, man, if, you know, I'm definitely not Mr. Hippie, Mr. Positivity, but I really do believe in, I love what I do. I love helping other people out. And I think helping other people out is its own reward. When I do that, I expect nothing in return. I just want you to do it for somebody else. So, yeah, thanks, everyone. Be kind, be patient. And I'll be posting some videos here soon, and I'll see everyone next week on my chat. Thanks for tuning in.